Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of Couch Coding, Quicksilver and Terminus. Your experts for today are Pantheon co-founders Matt Cheney and Josh Koenig. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window. We want to answer as many of your questions during the presentation as possible, so keep them coming. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone next week. I'd now like to turn over to Josh, Matt, and Prince.
Woo. Oh, yeah. So we got like real life cameras, RIP, Prince, legend.
Talk about, Quicksilver and Terminus today. So put some Clue in the coffee, and let's rock this.
All right. So welcome to Couch Coding. This is a new thing we're doing here at Pantheon, which I'm super excited about. We have we're using the format and the tools of the webinar, but it's not about showing you a presentation. It's about showing you real life code in real time and then talking about it. So if you have questions on your mind now, or if questions come up as we're going through our demos, feel free to throw them into the QA section on the webinar, and then we'll start to dig into those. That's really the most interesting part of this process, is the chance to go through real world use cases and dig into the concerns that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the webcams, I think, so we can give the full screen to the code. And I'm going to begin. We're talking about cloud integration tools. And so there's really two halves to this sweet Oreo cookie in my mind. One half is our command line interface, Terminus, and our new capability to authenticate Terminus via machine token, and then our Quicksilver sort of platform automation cloud hooks. So I'm just going to walk through how to get these things set up and showing you some of the latest and greatest things that are possible that you even if you've used these tools before, you might not be fully aware of. So starting out, I've got my Terminus. I've got that installed on my local host here, and I'm just going to show you how to do machine tokens. So I would go like, hey, Terminus auth login, because I need to authenticate. And now Terminus says, hey, wait a minute, maybe you should generate a machine token. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me go to my dashboard and do that. And I go to my account, and I go to machine tokens, and it sort of explains what's going on here. I'll click create token. Give it a name, and the cool thing here is that you can create as many tokens as you want. The ideal is like one per device or one per use case, and that way if there's ever any question about the security of that device, or if you're just not using it anymore, if you put something in like a CI service that you decided to stop using, it's really easy to revoke just that token, and then you know that like that thing no longer has access to Pantheon on your behalf. So I'm just going to call this my rainbow laptop. That's my cool keyboard stickers, and it's going to verify that I am who I say I am. Like if it's been more than a little while, I actually have to re-enter my password. It's a security feature. And now I can just copy and paste this command. And what's going to happen is logging in via machine token, and now I'm off. And I will never on this laptop have to enter my password to issue Terminus commands, which is like a really sort of big improvement for things. So the next thing that I'm going to do to be able to like automate my workflow into to greatness is I'm going to install some Terminus plugins. So Terminus plugins are a new thing. We're still shaping up some of the ins and outs of how they work, but we've already gotten a number of great plugins contributed by the community, and we're very excited for what we'll be able to do with these in the future. For now, in order to use plugins, you have to go to your home directory on your local workstation and make a Terminus plugins directory. So I'm going to do that by mkdir-p Terminus plugins. So I'm just going to create two directories with one command. Terminus plugins. You can see nothing up my sleeve. There they are. And I'm going to go to the wiki, which is where we have this stuff documented sort of fairly well. It's shaping up, but there's a list of known plugins. So one plugin I really like is the Filer plugin. This is a tool that helps you manage like connections to your GUI SFTP client, which is super great for developing on Pantheon, like if you're using multi-dev or you're developing directly in the dev environment. So all I do, let me just demo this really quickly. So here's a clean window, Terminus help, right? This is just going to show me all the normal Terminus commands. Now I'm going to go in my plugins directory, and I'm just going to clone the plugin repo into there. And now, let's act this is under the site command. So Terminus help site. So this has like all the commands you can run on a site, right? And notice that there's no command. Oh, I installed it, too late. So there's a filer command now, which is sort of a general one, and then there's a bunch for like specific popular tools like files that transmit, etc. So just to show you how this works, it's like pretty easy end to end. So I have this demo set up for us. This is just a clean site that I installed. Nothing's been done to it. There have been no commits and so forth. Just called the 421 couch demo. Another cool thing that I like to do is, and there's a number of ways you can set this up with the demo. I'll just do it directly. Export Terminus site equals 421 couch demo. I now never have to type the -- site command for the duration of the session, and you can set like sort of like your bash wizardry may vary, but however you want to set that environment variable, it can save you from typing a bunch of stuff in the future if you like. So that's kind of a nice thing to make your scripts. If you're scripting Terminus, a lot less verbose if you just set that environment variable at the beginning.
And then it's also easy to change later if you want to use it on a different site. Just change the variable at the top and wait.
So I've like half in my brain written a plugin that would do this based on the Git repo that you might already get context of and a few other things. But anyway, that's one of the beauties of plugins is that like now we can start to think about all these second order features that you can pile on top of the raw capabilities of Terminus core that would make your workflow so much easier. So now that I've exported this, I can do something like Terminus site transmit, one of my favorite SFTP clients, and then I still do have to specify an end, so I want to connect to the dev environment, that's really the useful one. And it knows that it's the 4.1 couch demo, it knows that it wants to use transmit, it's going to open it up for me, I don't have to copy and paste anything, it just connects and does the whole thing on my behalf. Now that's also because, to be fair, I have already installed an SSH key as well for doing my SFTP and Git commands. That's something else that everybody should do, like set up public key authentication, load your key into your profile. Machine tokens are for Terminus, SSH keys are for you or things operating on your behalf that need to talk SSH. So those are kind of both necessary to do this whole dance. But then I can go into this code directory and like I could say, let me edit the README and just say Josh was here and click save, and this is like the core Pantheon demo. Like, bada bing, it's already there. I've got the files changed. Now I'm like doing all the stuff, and I can see what I did. And now I can commit that to Git, or I can blow it away. I'm actually going to toggle into Git mode now for this site for the going forward, and I don't care about that README change, so I'm gonna let it go away.
I really like to just quickly drop it in with the SFTP client, because often I'm like shared on projects where someone asks a question and it's in development, so I like just create a multi-head branch and then just log with SFTP and just throw a couple of debugging statements in just to see. Because I'm not really going to do days of development. I just want to answer a certain question for someone or see a problem, and that way I can get into there really, really fast, so I can save time to set up a whole local dev environment for just like a small little thing.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of that too. But for the purposes of this demo, I have made already a local Git clone, so I'll go to Sandbox, 421. So this is just the code, same thing, local repo, git remote -v. As you can see, the normal long repo strings for us, nothing on my sleeves. And for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to go install some more Terminus plugins, because we have some awesome ones for working with Quicksilver. Quicksilver are the cloud integration tools that we launched earlier this year. And basically, if Terminus is like acting from, I'm going to put on my camera because I can gesticulate while I describe this. So if Terminus is going from the outside in to Pantheon, the cloud integration tools are going inside out. Now, they can actually also be like inside in, and that like you could trigger things on Pantheon from Pantheon, like if you just want to like clear your caches automatically or like munge a database or something. It doesn't have to be an external call. But one of the most exciting things is you can say, automatically trigger something with Terminus. Cloud integration Quicksilver will pick that up based on the workflow that's been run, and that can actually trigger something that triggers an external action, like maybe in a CI tool or something else. Matt's got some really great demos that he's going to show. And then with machine tokens, you can actually have those external things using Terminus on your behalf securely, and they can trigger more things on the platform, which could trigger more cloud integration hooks, which could trigger more external stuff. Like, if you've ever played with the ridiculousness that is like if this then that on the internet, this was like originally internally at the end of last year when we were putting all this together. That was the first demo that I did for Pantheon developers internally. It was just making it so that when you did stuff on Pantheon, it would blink lights in a room. It's not actually practical, but it is a very palatable demonstration of what it means to be able to do this stuff. And so the fact that you can endlessly hook these chains together allows you to really add a lot of value, because you can save a bunch of time and do pretty awesome stuff. So
I'm not convinced that blinking lights isn't valuable. I think if you have like a dev team all in one room and every time there's a commit, there's like some lights blinking and maybe play some Prince songs, I think that could actually be like high motivation for everyone, you know, to get a commit, to hear the song, keep it going.
Yeah, maybe like something like leaderboard thing. I don't know. Like you could gamify your entire life with this stuff, and clearly that's the dystopian future of augmented reality that we're hurtling towards at unstoppable speed. And now Pantheon's a part of that story.
We might get to live forever at the end if the robots don't kill us, so it's not horrible.
Okay. I'm going to install a couple more plugins, though. So I've got one that my colleague Greg put together, which is awesome, which is this Quicksilver plugin, which is just basically some helpers for setting up Quicksilver projects. Like if you've never used Quicksilver before, install Terminus, do what I've just done, set it up, and then use this plugin because it makes things a lot easier. And then there's sort of a meta one that is useful in addition to that, which is called Secrets, that we'll get into in a second. I'm just going to install it now. There's also a beautiful person from the community has contributed a plugin for managing plugins, which is awesome. That's certainly something that we're going to have in Terminus core once we've nailed down a few more of the details of how plugins work. So if you want to use the contributed Terminus plugin manager, you totally can. And it was a great contribution. We'll probably actually use some of the code there. But we feel like that's something Terminus internally should maintain. So when Terminus 1.0 comes out, you can expect a lot of this to just be things you don't have to necessarily know about these repos. You'll just be able to discover and install commands natively. Okay, now that I've got these two things installed, and I'm in Git mode, what I'm going to do is type, well, first let's actually go to yet another window over here. And I'm going to do the same thing, export Terminus site equals 421 ouch demo, and then I'm going to do Terminus workflows watch. So this is like the key command for doing Quicksilver development. And what it does is it hooks up your Terminus, using Terminus, it hooks your terminal up to the workflow system that powers the job spinner on Pantheon, which you probably all know and love. There's a lot more data behind the job spinner that you can get access to this way. And critically, you can get access to like the specific ins and outs of your Quicksilver operations. So with that going in the background, we'll just refer back to it in a second.
I like to think of this as just like tailing the log file for what's going on. So you see in real time basically what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
To make it all happen.
So Terminus, Quicksilver, install, debug. All right. And what this has done is checked out. So let me go back and show you again, nothing on my sleeve. We have a great repo called Quicksilver Examples. And this is like a whole set of things, and please feel free to contribute your own examples of things you can do with Quicksilver. Both awesome, super practical things like integrating with the Jira ticket tool, and maybe less practical but still no less interesting things like we have I haven't merged this one yet, but we got a pull request from David Newton on the CSE team to add like SMS integration. So if you really want to text yourself when things happen on Pantheon, you can, or text other people. Or maybe you call someone and read them a robotic commit message over the phone. All this is possible.
You don't think you're getting enough credit at work. People don't think you're working. You're doing as many commits. Just make sure that they know every time. Every single time.
Right. So what that command did was just install the debug example from the examples repo. And the debug example is just like kind of your go-to first getting started. It doesn't do anything practical other than like outputting some information. What that command did was it created a Pantheon YAML file, and that's the key to all the Quicksilver integration. And then it created this private directory, and if I look in there, I can see that there's a scripts directory and a debugging examples directory, and then there's this debug.php file. So I'm going to git commit, we're going to git add these things, git commit and debug example, Quicksilver, and git push origin master. And what will happen is when you push up a Pantheon YAML file to Pantheon, we'll actually notice that. We'll validate that the syntax in the YAML file is correct because most likely in the future you'll be editing this directly, not just installing it from a plugin, but to do exactly what you want to change it. And then it'll load that up. And then over here in the workflows thing, we can already start to see like the started and finished and like that validating Pantheon and syncing code and so forth is being tracked in our workflow tailing. I'll just show you the ins and outs of this real quick. So if we look at the pantheon.yaml file, it's pretty simple, right? There's an API version in here because we'll be evolving this over time. And then there's one set of commands that says workflows. These are workflows that Pantheon YAML cares about. Clear cache, pretty common workflow, the most clicked button on Pantheon. After, we have before and after. That's kind of useful. Type web PHP. This is the only type right now that actually executes a PHP script the same way that like using the parameters of the web environment. But the neat thing is that you can put it in a private directory, so like it's not exposed to the public. It's just being executed under the security regime and auspices of your web container. So, and this just says run this debug.php file, and we can look at that real quick. Private debug.php, and this is just going to be like, hey, what was in the payload, what was in the environment, redact some things that I might not want to have spit out into a terminal window, and then be done. It really is just like, show me what's going on, let's see what happens.
And this is a great place to start too if you're trying to build your own thing, because then you can like quickly see all the variables and stuff you have to work with, and then sort of modify that into the kind of thing you want.
So now I'm going to call Terminus to clear the cache, which is the workflow that it's set up to look for. And
this is the new cache clearing methodology with Terminus. You could call Drush as well, but the Drush syntax for clearing cache is different depending on what's going on. If you're using WordPress, different still.
Yeah.
So I think just one standard thing is good. Just call it clear cache regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah. So basically, we got our this is the operation. The operation name is dump debugging output. It finished in 4 seconds. Here's the debugging output. Right, so there's a payload that comes with all these workflows that has a bunch of information about what's going on. So like workflow type, their cache, user ID, that's me, my ID on Pantheon, and here's my email. There's a description that comes from the YAML file, more information about the username, because frequently when you're doing notifications, that's useful to like throw in. The site in question, the owner that's there, trace ID, this is actually useful if we're trying to debug something, you're having issues with it. CSR support team can use this in the future. You'll be probably able to get more detail with this trace ID. The environment, the description, user, first name, last name, full name is in there, and then the stage is after. And then also there's the environment that it's in. So you have all this like other data about the site if you want to make use of it. And you can actually, I mean, your PHP code could inspect and learn more things. Like I've seen people do stuff where they have PHP look at the Git repository and like figure out like what branch am I on? What were the last 2 commits? Like whatever you need to do. Like you can use your script itself can gather and harvest more data from the application container to make use of. So this is like just a bare bones example for things you can start doing. And now to like make it a little bit more actionable, let's do another example real quick. So I would go Terminus, Quicksilver, install, Slack, notification, and that will install a new one. So get status, right? We've got a new thing in there. We've modified the Pantheon YAML. You can see the Pantheon YAML file now has a bunch more in it. So for clear cache and deploy and sync code, we have a thing that tries to post to Slack. If we look at the actual Slack file, private scripts Slack notification.php, it has a bunch of things in here. So I'm going to change this to couch coding, because that's the channel I'm going to post to. And then there's this bit about secrets. So there's a big challenge in doing these types of integrations is where you manage your secrets. So the Terminus machine code is an example of a secret, and that's managed on my local computer. The Slack webhook URL is another kind of secret. And so you don't really, I mean, you want to avoid in the long run committing all these things to your code repo if they're sensitive. It's a general best practice. And there's we have a company that we work with called Locker that's actually for high security secrets. It's doing a really great job at trying to bring the best practices people use for high security secrets around like payment gateways and other stuff to like manage all your secrets that way. Because honestly, like you should manage all your secrets that way. But in the meantime, we have the sort of lowest barrier to entry, but still not putting it in the repo example, is to use the private file system space on Pantheon and just manage a little JSON file So this looks for a secret called Slack URL, and I'm going to go ahead and use yet another Terminus plugin, that secrets one that you saw me set up. I'm going to go to the MMLC Slack instance where we have the incoming webhooks. I'm just going to get this secret URL, which is right here, and I'm going to do Terminus secrets set Slack URL this. And what it's, and I can specify an environment, so it goes for the dev environment. And what this is going to do is it's going to set up a secrets.json file in the private directory for Pantheon.
And that's not accessible on the web. That's not part of the version control repo. It's not something that will get exposed in that way. So you can keep that secret.
I'm worried about that private command downtown. If need be, I can just do this with the old transmit, but I'm just going to set it again.
You can also get some Scrabble tiles and write C-Tech astronomy out, and then have that be your too many secrets.
All right, so we don't need this anymore. We do need this open. So now we have this git add because we need to add that new script. Git status. We're adding the two new things. Git commit. And adding select example. Git push origin master. Over here, we're going to see as soon as this kicks off, it's going to show us the normal workflow stuff for the Pantheon YAML being updated and the code being pushed, which is happening. And then, so one of the things about Quicksilver that is just important to understand when you're debugging is that when you add something new to Quicksilver, whether it's a script or a new workflow that you want to hook to, the first time you push it, it doesn't trigger itself for the thing you just added. It's sort of a little bit of an ordering question. Like, we have to know about the thing that you wanted to add in order to do it. Oh, I just did it there. So it's because it's an after. So this fires after, and so it would have done that. And as we can see, we got the Pantheon Quicksilver deploying site 415 couch demo by me, environment dev, workflow, after sync code, and like I can go to the dashboard right there. So that's pretty cool. And if I clear the cache, boom, I would expect to see the same thing again, as well as the output from the debugger. Since I now have two, according to my Pantheon YAML file, two things that happen after I clear the cache. I've got a debugging output and someone clearing the cache again. So here we see there's the debugging output, here's someone clearing the cache again, and then back over here in Slack, we see, it says deploying, but it's after clear cache. I think that's just like a bug in the example.
I think you just want to use the rocket ship emoji. So it's like, it's taking off, it's going.
Well, and so like you could do cool stuff. Like let's actually maybe fix that. So edit, private, scripts, Slack notifications, so we just have the text says deploying, even though it's default. Yeah. So we just need to fix this is just the example stuff in here. You got to do different things for different deploys.
Yeah, I trim mine down a little bit just because it gives you a lot of information, which can be helpful. But if it's you don't need all of it, you can just modify this.
Right.
I think this is, if you use Slack and Pantheon, like this is a really easy thing to throw into your project because it basically works out of the box once you set up the webhook URL. And like you get this really great effect if you have a team sort of talking about the project. And someone's like, hey man, like we need to fix this thing or whatever. Someone's like, okay, I'll get on it. And then like you see the commit that they did. It's like, okay, they're on it. Then you see somebody like push it to like test, and then you're like, okay, now I can review it. And someone else pushes it live. It's like sort of, have the Pantheon talking with your team. And I think that's nice just to get everyone on the same page.
Yep. Well, and I think your demos will show some more of that, like kind of like fully built out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I even got some like even custom cool icons for it because Slack does a lot of things for you, and then in the API you can be sort of wild about it.
All right. So that I think we should transfer the screen over to you.
Matt,
sounds. You can take control.
All right. Well, awesome, Josh. I think those are pretty cool. Some stuff actually I didn't know sort of coming out of that. I think the sort of Terminus plugins really are a nice sort of future way to sort of build out stuff that you're doing on sort of a custom basis, and really build from there. I think for folks who are like fans of like Isaac Asimov, Terminus is just a starting point. It's the first planet you go to where you build the galactic library. That's sort of a lie because you're really just getting to a place you have to use high technology to like conquer the world. So Quicksilver is sort of a path on that for everybody. And what I want to show off sort of as part of this is just to get people sort of thinking about things that you could do beyond just the basics. And I think after this, definitely if you have questions, come post them. We're happy to chat about whatever, obviously, but specific things that maybe as developers you do for part of your development workflow that you want robots to do for you. Because the robots will drive your car, so they should at least like help you with your web development, is my feeling on the matter. The three things I'm basically going to show off are basically three different external services that I personally use and I think are good for some of the stuff I use. There's various other solutions here, sort of the pathway and the examples are about the sort of same, depending on what you're doing. But the three I'm going to show you off today, one is a tool called Backtrack, which is a visual regression tool where you'll actually be able to compare sort of before and after versions of your site. And that can help you to like identify differences and sort of see what's changed. That's pretty cool. Second is a service called Spotbot, which I use for cross-browser testing, where I can actually go look at a site for its Android, iOS, and Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome version. And then the third is a load testing tool called Load Impact that I think is pretty great, and it'll actually run a variety of different simulated users scenarios on your site. Performance obviously pretty important for us, but making sure your code is performant as well is a big deal. And I've set a few examples to sort of show this off. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about Backtrack, which is the visual regression tool. We have an example here in our Quicksilver repository, Backtrack Visual Regression. And it's pretty straightforward to do. Basically, you typically, in this case, I'm doing it after a deploy. So I'm using that deploy hook in Quicksilver, and I'm calling my private scripts Backtrack Visual Regression PHP file, which is right here. You similar to sort of the API action, you're going to need an API key. If you need to, you can use the secrets JSON method to put it in. That's a very good best practice. This is the link to some of the documentation. There's a security section around that. You also actually need to have a specific project ID that you set up. The way Backtrack works is, sort of show you right here. You actually, go there and set up a project. You call it the name of the project. And then you actually define a few things about each project. So you define some of the URLs that you want to check on the project. This is pretty cool because we'll actually scan your sitemap and find specific URLs that it wants to check out. And then you set up, and this should hopefully look familiar to folks, a dev, test, and live environment for it. So in Pantheon world, this is really straightforward, right? Dev, test, and live. And you sort of put those three in there. And then what happens is, with inside of the Backtrack kind of situation, there is a REST API that allows you to actually make Backtrack actually fire jobs for you, which is great. With that API key that you have, there's a number of different methodologies that you can call, but the thing that I'm most into is you can actually do a comparison between the production environment and the staging environment. This is the compare prod stage command. And so what happens is that when we actually go to a specific site, so in this case, I've got this D8 Quicksilver magic site that I set up. And if we go actually and look at it, it's just a Drupal 8 site that I set up. It's got some blocks and some other things. And what we'll go ahead and do is just make a really quick change using the now improved blocked interface, which I think is pretty excellent. And we'll go ahead and on this site, we had it said powered by Drupal. But maybe we'll go ahead and just get rid of that because it's also in the footer and it's also like a totally blue site. So I don't feel anyone is going to be confused that this is a Drupal site. I don't think I need that on there. And then one of the things I'll do just to sort of do a quick config export. This is using the configuration management technology in Drupal 8. And that's basically saying, hey, I've changed some blocks around. Let me go put that into code. And this is the kind of change, obviously, you're going to be making when you're doing development, and what happened, we deleted the Powered by Drupal block. So, remove the obvious. And we'll go ahead and commit that. And one of the things that we can do, sort of just to sort of check out what's going on, is we'll go ahead and drop that workflows watch command. This will actually let us see, like as Josh mentioned, in real time what's going on. If we're not interested in, if we miss this, or we want to go back, actually, the Terminus workflow command allows us to also get a list of previous jobs that were run, and then you can actually do a show command to sort of see the output. So I like watching it in real time because it makes it sort of feel alive, which is very important. But if you do like want to go back and, we keep it for a while,
Yeah, it's
many days.
2 weeks for most workflows, and then I think we make deploys are currently immortal because that's important to keep track of deploys. But like cache clear, there's so many cache clears happening on the platform. Loads will expire actually faster, and the normal workflows kind of expire out of the log in 2 weeks. And for now, those are the parameters that we've agreed were okay.
Which seems pretty reasonable. I mean, usually you'll sort of figure it out pretty quick. And with a lot of this stuff too, some of the examples, we obviously kick out the information here in the log, just part of the Quicksilver scripts, but I also show you my next one, you can actually even dump the output in your Slack channel, which in some of these examples is gonna make a lot of sense. But what I did just now is I actually hit that sort of copy content from live, deploy code from dev button. This is actually setting up my test environment. And this has always been one of my favorite features on Pantheon because you can like get a test environment that's very much like your production environment because you've got the latest database, you've got the same configuration containers, you've got the latest code, and it all sort of does it in one click, which is awesome. But what Quicksilver does is let us expand it well beyond that because once I have a test environment set up, I'm going to like want to do stuff like test it. And there's going to be a little bit of manual testing as well, but one of the things that the visual regression test is really good for is the visual regression test is basically designed to compare and contrast sort of two different images of the site. So what it's going to do is it's basically going to like look at like the live version of this site, which has some different stuff on it. And then it's going to look at the newly created test site after we've done a few things. And it's going to, probably notice that this powered by Drupal item we actually got removed. And one of the sort of other tricks up the sleeve here with the Quicksilver piece is you notice that I actually had done a configuration change using the configuration management stuff in Drupal 8. For those who are familiar with it, to actually, once you put it into code, you push it in the test environment, but you actually have to run another command in Drupal 8 to do like a configuration synchronize, which is like just to bring it in. And that can be a little bit annoying because you have to like go to the test environment, log in, go to the configuration management page, hit synchronize, wait, and then like go for it before you actually are able to actually see what the site live is going to be. And that's something that obviously it can throw you off your process and takes a little bit of time. So another thing that I sort of had put in Quicksilver, which is like hella easy, is an example that's currently a pull request, but we'll get, maybe not, maybe it's already, oh, perfect. Is a Drush config import from my colleague Steve, where we're not actually doing anything very complicated at all. We're just saying, hey, after a deploy, the first thing we want to do is run Drush config import -y. So push all the config that's in our version control to our test environment, and then clear the cache. And that's something that runs when we set up the test environment, but it also something that runs when we go to the live environment. So we have this very like clean process of saying, when I deploy the test and live, deploy the code, run update PHP, and then import the config. And you can use the same kind of methodology also. There's one we have in examples for features. If you do a lot of features revert, for example, exact same process, go ahead and when you do a deploy, features revert all, and then clear the cache. So that's part of what's going on here. And that's important because the visual change that I'm very interested in here is in fact needing the configuration import. But we'll go back and I can sort of show you what's going on. We have a number of different pieces here. And I can go ahead and it's actually kicked off this job programmatically. That was what happened. You'll see here in the log, it says, hey, do a visual regression test with backtrack finished in 3 seconds. And that doesn't mean the whole test is finished. It just means it kicked off the job and it specifically gave us the URL to check out. And that's cool because I can go take that, jump on over to my site, and at that URL, I can actually start to see, the various pages. So I've got the user login page, content page, and the main page. And I can go in and sort of see, oh wait, that powered by Drupal block is gone. Now this isn't necessarily a problem, I wanted to remove the block, but what it tells me is that it helps me to focus in on the kinds of changes that I want to have. And that's part of what's awesome about visual regression is that it's not the end all be all for all testing, but it's the kind of thing where if I'm manually reviewing 100 pages of the site, I want to focus on the stuff that actually looks different because that's what I care about. There also is a really great process, and this is something as you're sort of doing security updates that come out or bug fix updates that come out. If you're just like, applying a security update to your site, it typically isn't going to change how the site's going to look. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Like, it's like, unless you're doing something crazy. But, I still, if I propose a security update, I'm still going through 50 pages, make sure everything sort of looks right. And that takes time, which means that, like, I don't necessarily get the updates out as fast or whatever. This is great because every time I push an update, it can scan 200 pages and it can come back and it gives me these little percentages of difference where it's like, this case, of the pages, 75% of the pages had differences. I think like the RSS.xml page was unchanged. But if it says 0%, you have like higher confidence that everything is going to be really cool.
And this is one of the things also where, it's powerful potentially for automation in terms of releasing things. Like if you want to get to a real continuous deployment type of workflow and you don't expect a visual change, like you're refactoring stuff or deploying a security update, that gets you to continuous deployment with a 0% diff. But even for just doing normal quality assurance and review, one of the things that'll happen is that the obvious stuff people would catch, right? If the site's broken or like the layout is totally screwed up, that's the stuff that people will catch. But the great thing about having a computer do the visual regression test is that it's incredibly nitpicky, and it can catch little tiny details that might have gone unnoticed by the human eye. Like, for instance, if you were focusing on changing something in the top left-hand side part of the website, and that worked all as expected, and you were just using like your normal human eyeball to do this, you would look at that area and you would say, yeah, that looks really good, and it did everything that I wanted. I don't see anything weird there. Let's go ahead and release that. If you had a subtle problem on the bottom right-hand side, because you weren't looking there for the change, you didn't expect a change there, you might not even look there to review it, and you might accidentally release some kind of embarrassing visual problem. And so the great thing about having automated perceptual diffing or visual regression testing is that the computer doesn't care where you were trying to make the change or how big the change was. Like if it's just like the font alignment on the bottom right is screwed up, that'll show up and it'll draw your eye there by highlighting it in red.
And I think it's a really cool thing. Josh and I are both really excited about it. Our colleague, Kate Kligman, actually did a great presentation at DrupalCon LA where she talks even more in depth about a lot of this technology. If you're interested in this, definitely check it out. It's called CI for CSS, creating a visual regression testing workflow. And now it's even more cool with Quicksilver because you can bake this in as part of your process.
Yes, it just happened automatically.
So that was sort of example one of stuff that I think is super cool. Example two is, and I'll move over to this Mission Bicycle demo site just so we can see some bikes and feel a little more athletic this morning or afternoon. And this is again a Drupal 8 site, and I'll just go ahead and again make a quick little change to it just so we can sort of see. The cool piece about this site is that we've actually wired in a bunch of different things to this example. This is something we're working on to show off next month, but we'll give you all a sneak peek now because it's sort of cool. And the major sort of stuff that's going on here, and I can show you the Pantheon.yaml because it's the YAML time, is I'm doing a number of different things. So the first thing is I've actually gone ahead and like wired in Slack notifications to this stuff. Like I use Slack a lot. We usually hear Pantheon a lot. I think it's a great tool. You do the exact same thing in HitChat or potentially IRC or other services. But the idea is that this like log is super good for like debugging and stuff. But like if I'm trying to do things like send along links to my team or just like have honestly a record that's persistent, I'd rather have it in a sort of channel right here. So this is, hello, let's party. It's YAML time. So I'll go ahead and just throw some text in my channel. I've set up the Slack notification like Josh showed before, and I've made that change to the site. So I'll go do the same thing I did before. It's a quick config export, and I'll go ahead and do DrupalCon demo, and I'll go export that. And go back to the Pantheon. And as soon as that finishes, we'll do the same thing we did before. We're also running Drupal 8.1 that came out yesterday, so let's cross our fingers on this. Lest there's some questions. We'll see here, obviously, some blocks got changed, as one does. And go ahead and close that. And we'll go ahead and do a quick commit, say rainbow magic. And we'll go ahead and commit. And first thing we're going to notice is this is going to do a commit for us. But one of the things that we have is after each sync code operation, which is code commit, we actually want to tell our Slack people about it. We want to have the Slack channel have that kind of information. And you'll see it says rainbow magic there. And then as soon as it finishes, it'll actually go ahead and tell us all about it. We'll go ahead and we'll do a tail here just to show off as well and sort of see what's going on. You'll see here, bam, get on Pantheon, git commit, rainbow magic, here's the commit, it's by me. And Slack's really cool, it's got a really extendable sort of API, so I actually am even putting in the git icon, so it's got even more awesomeness. Josh is also in here, can sort of talk about it, be like, oh, that's cool, like, thanks for, oh, perfect, for doing that, that's not anything too crazy, but it sort of gets the feel of what's going on. Where it gets really awesome is within this test environment. So I'll go ahead and kick this off, rainbow magic, and start to set up my test environment. And now what's going to happen with the test environment is I actually am running a variety of different tests that I'm interested in doing. This is something I definitely encourage folks to do. You're obviously going to do some testing all the time anyway, but the stuff that I want to test is I first want to do a test with a Spotbot QA tool, which has some visual regression stuff in it as well. But the thing that I really like about it is that it's a very, very fast cross-browser test. That when I'm doing development, I'm obviously going to do cross-browser testing. I want to make sure stuff looks good on phones and iOS, Android, Internet Explorer. But I'm not necessarily going to like bust out an iPhone or bust out my Internet Explorer VM for like every single thing that I do. Like that's just, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of repetition. And I honestly typically it's not as much of a problem. Mostly because we're living now in like a much more modern era. Shout out to anyone who had to do this like 7 or 8 years ago where Internet Explorer was like crazy, a lot more browser issues. But you still have some, and you definitely want to make sure it looks right for everyone. But that's something that, also maybe if you're the developer, you're maybe not in the QA loop. That's not actually what you're doing. So one of the things that you can do is by integrating a tool like Spotbot where you can do the browser testing and putting it in Slack, you can give people a heads up. You're like, okay, hey, we deployed on Pantheon. We've got like the deploy message. And then I just for fun put in the Drush stuff just so it knows that, hey, we're importing some Drush config. In this case, we're moving around a few blocks. And it tells me, hey, I imported it, and then it's done. And then what happens is that we're actually going to go kick off that Spotbot thing, and it'll actually give me a result set. And it'll take a couple seconds just to actually get the browsers. I clicked on that pretty fast. But what's awesome is that it actually is going out and running tests really quickly on Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer, iPhone, and Google. And this is our Android. And this is something that someone else who's responsible for deployment can actually go in and look. And they can go in and say, oh, that looks good, or that looks bad, or hey, go redo it. And they can actually, right within the actual tool, kick back. In this case, stuff looks decently good in Internet Explorer. We can even see historical versions of it if we've done a few times, and then go through different builds. Just make sure everything looks really good, and then if that's nice, it's like, hey, that looks great. Great in IE. So a nice way just to get the cross-browser stuff happening sort of automatically for you. And that's made possible with this tool. It has an API, and you basically pass it a page, and it'll take a picture of it, which is nice. That's sort of part 2. And that integration is also in the Quicksilver example. If you want to play around with that, this is the Spotbot right here. So that's pretty cool. Last thing before we do some questions, performance testing. So this is something that sites need to be fast, they need to be scalable, and they need to work under a variety of different use cases. And those use cases will vary depending on the kind of application you're running and what you expect your traffic and your load to be. Is it I post a blog that goes viral and has a lot of people engaged commenting on it? Is it I send out a newsletter blast and expecting a sort of set of traffic? Whatever. A lot of tools exist on the internet where you can actually write sort of tests that make sure that you can stress test your site. And you can set up actually quite complicated tests. You can have folks log in, you can have percentage post comments, you can have them come in waves, come from different places, do different things or whatever. The great thing about Load Impact is that it has an API where you can actually, once you have to set up the sort of tests you want, the scenarios in there, but once you get that test configuration set up, you can actually go ahead and just calling this API test config ID start, you can actually, with your API token, start up that test. And we have that, that's in a pull request right now in the repository. And basically what it will do is, you know, nothing too crazy. It will actually, here's the docs for it. But basically what it will do is it'll go off and take your test ID, take your API token, and then it's actually just calling that same API call to kick off your job. And then what happens is, because it sort of knows where the URL is going to live, it actually will give you a URL right here. And this, you currently have to be logged into the tool to actually see the info. Although they have a new version coming out where it's not, and we can actually see, we just ran the test, 10 virtual users for 1 minute, and we can actually go ahead and look at the test and sort of start to see, you know, hey, here's some of the graphs, some of the information that's going on. So things look like, you know, not super crazy. This is the spike of what we're doing. The load time, you know, 1.89 seconds isn't great, but this is fine for what it is. And you know, 10 users for a minute is obviously not the best test you could run. We just did that to show off the tool, but you could run it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever. The great thing is that it sort of like, you know, exists inside of your Slacks you can see. You can even get more clever. One of the things that I've noticed sort of working with a lot of these external tools is that there actually are a ton of other companies, including Load Impact, that are using the same kind of like workflow hooks as part of their system. So you can use Quicksilver to like hook into Pantheon to kick off the job, and then you could to tell Slack, and then you could use Load Impact to, when it finishes the job, to tell Slack too, and you can actually get all that integrated. And I think this is increasing the world as developers we're like living in, where we have a lot of external tools to our job. We can wire them all together using our specific kind of logic, and we can sort of get it that way.
I think that's just, you know, overall the direction that things are headed. It's about integration. This is the whole microservices versus monoliths debate, where this is the Internet of Things. This is the future world that we have is one in which we're taking the Unix philosophy of small pieces loosely joined and applying it more broadly to, you know, our personal lives, our social lives, the technologies that drive but I think more importantly for us at Pantheon, the technologies that drive our productivity and help us get our work done on a day-to-day basis. So that was a lot of demo. We took a lot of time with that, but I think we should take the time to answer the questions as well. So Chusa, do you want to guide us on this?
Alrighty, let's just launch this off with the first question, which is, how is Terminus site clear cache different from Drush CC all? So they should be equivalent, but I can explain sort of in detail how they're different. I'm going to gesticulate, so I'm going to put on my video here. So there's multiple layers of caching, and it's caches all the way down. So there's different things that you need to do to effectively clear the cache of the website. There's the need to clear internal application caches, which is like any objects that are cached and sometimes caches that are paged internally. And then there's the need to clear Pantheon's edge cache, which is the reverse proxy thing that we do that holds onto, you know, images and full pages if you want. So we discovered relatively early on in the development of all this architecture that if you don't clear the caches in the right order, you get really poor results. Because if you think about it, clearing the cache at the edge first and then clearing the application cache sets you up for a condition where in the intervening time, some other intrepid user visits the site and then repopulates the edge cache. So what we do is we hook into the CMS APIs for internal cache clearing and say that should trigger an edge cache. So when you are running Terminus, Drush, CC all, that's opening the SSH tunnel into your application environment and invoking Drush remotely, which then, when it is complete, registers a shutdown function to clear the Pantheon edge cache. When you click the Clear Caches button in the dashboard, it's triggering the same thing, except it's using our workflow system to run the Drush, CC all, or WP CLI clear cache on the CMS environment, and then we wait for that to be complete
to clear the edge cache. So the question is how it's orchestrated, and depending on how your Drush operations are working, and there's it gets into the edge cases, there are differences because we are invoking what should be the same code path via a different kind of orchestration layer, but functionally they should be the same.
Alrighty, next question is there an event on Quicksilver for creating a new multi-dev environment?
That's a good question, and the current answer is no. We launched Quicksilver with a limited set of events, workflows that are usable. So deploy is like deploy to test or live. Sync code is git push or SFTP on server dev commit. And then clone database is obvious, and their cache should be obvious too. But you'll notice that if you do the workflows watch, there's a lot more workflows going on in the system, and it is definitely part of the plan to increase the number of workflows that are hookable via Quicksilver. We wanted to start with a smaller set so that we would be able to provide good support and learn more about the use cases that people have. But I would say creating a multi-dev environment, actually, and also initializing a site are like really high on my list of workflows to add, because you can imagine the power of being able to automatically run a number of post-environment creation setup steps for your multi-devs or post-site setup steps for brand new sites.
Yep. All right, next question. The load, impact, and backtrack QS examples are great for one site, but what if you have 100 sites on the same distro and you are upgrading all of them? Where to start with that scenario?
So I think that the question is, if you have 100 sites that are all running on the same distro, you need to make a judgment about what degree of testing is required for all of those 100 sites. And the ultimate engineering answer is all sites must be tested in all ways at all times. You could also decide that what you want to do is test a representative sampling of the sites if you know that there's not, for instance, if you're tight with your code control and you know that the end users of the sites are not altering the sites themselves at all, they're just using the site as a CMS, then the risk is lower, like do 10 with a lot of testing, and then the other ones could kind of like face a lower bar perhaps. But this is all scriptable. So the point is we have, and you can see where this is going, right? There's a future where like more and more of this is just integrated and automated, but what we're delivering right now are the raw capabilities for us to deliver cool plugins and examples, but really for you to develop scripts and automation that meet your specific needs.
And yeah, I would also add that on Pantheon, you obviously can create an upstream, just like a Git repository that has a code base, and then you can deploy that to 100 sites, which is probably how the question sort of is coming up. One thing that you can also do as part of that code base is you can have a Pantheon.yaml file in the code base. You can have some scripts in the code base, and you can deploy those along with it. You're definitely going to have some gotchas. If you're using a secrets.json file, you would have to set those up for the sites, which would require a little bit of work. And then you would obviously want to make sure that you don't go too crazy if you're doing 100 callbacks all at once to a load testing service. You want to make sure that your plan level supports that. Like load impact only that you do 1 or 2 of them at a time,
right?
Depending on how you set it up.
Yeah. So you have to kind of be intentional about what you're testing. One of the things that we were working on as a demo, but wasn't ready for this couch coding session, is showing how to use a continuous integration service, like just say Jenkins, right? You could be running your own Jenkins instance, and Quicksilver could be communicating with that Jenkins instance. That Jenkins instance could also have a machine token and be able to use Terminus to run things on the platform. So you could imagine a world where in Jenkins, you create a really, 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 really restricted user that's only allowed to trigger one job, and you could call that job test me. And you could feel like maybe it's okay to include the credentials for that one user for that one job in your upstream, right? And then your upstream could automatically go and say, every time anything gets put in the test environment, trigger the Jenkins instance to queue a test me process. The test me process could do whatever it needs to do. Like maybe you have some sites that, the test me job on Jenkins knows that if this site name is in the top 10, give it the rigorous test. If it's in the other 90, give it the less rigorous test. And it could run those tests, and if those tests pass, it could use Terminus to do the final step of the deploy, which would be to push the results live. And again, that's getting to the notion of continuous deployment with your websites on Pantheon. That's a general industry aspiration that everybody has. It's hard, but it's worth it. If you can get there, especially if you're managing sites at scale. So I would expect that as we continue to evolve these tools going forward, the use case of doing some with Quicksilver, some with Terminus, and then adding a third piece, which is really going to need to be managed by you, the developer, since there's details there that we can't know. To orchestrate those things and chain the actions together will be one of the most, one of sort of the holy grails of setting all this up.
Right. Next question is, do these plugins and tools only work in D8?
So I can take that. So I showed Austin Drupal 8 stuff because I'm excited about it. But theyese are tools that will work for WordPress, they'll work for Drupal 7, Drupal 6, and Drupal 8. They're very much all across the platform. You may have to make some specific sort of changes, like instead of using the Drupal config import in Drupal 8, you might need to use features for Drupal 7. Or if you're doing imports with WordPress, you can use the WordPress CFM import tool. So some of the examples need to be modified for the CMS. But this is a platform-wide technology. It will work on any kind of upstream, any kind of product that you're deploying to Pantheon.
Yeah, and I didn't call it out. The example site that I set up, the 421 couch example, was just a WordPress site. Again, it's a platform capability. Obviously, anything you do that interfaces with Drush or WP CLI is application-specific, and certainly any tests that you run that you really care about are going to be very particular to your websites. But the raw capabilities for Terminus and Quicksilver are across the board.
So like a browser test or whatever is going to, just give it the URL. It doesn't even care what it is. It'll take a picture of whatever it sees.
Great. I'm going to take just a couple more questions. The next one is a long one, so follow along. I have a machine user authenticating via token. My script spawns multiple processes to upgrade all of our sites. Any problem from an authentication standpoint or other standpoint with multiple processes using the same credentials?
So, no, except if you are doing that with Terminus, you may want to investigate using Terminus as a PHP library rather than as a command line tool. And the reason is that the Terminus command line interface caches things like the list of sites and other things locally. And it caches sessions locally. So there are a number of cases where if you want to spawn, you either need to spawn like multiple sandboxed users that can like orchestrate their own set of Terminus commands with their own kind of Terminus local environments, which is actually, that's also possible to do. You can just there's a config variable, I believe, for what the Terminus environment on the Terminus config store is. So you could look into that, or you could look into using Terminus as a library. So you basically can say, I want to require Terminus into my own script application, and rather than you just invoke the core functions, rather than invoking it through the CLI, and that might help. But basically, there's not an authentication issue with multiplexing, but you may run into operational issues around like the way that Terminus caches data locally.
Is there any rate limiting with Terminus if you're doing it that many times?
There's some very high rate limiting. So like it's, I think, thousands of requests per minute, something like that. There are some more effective rate limiting in terms of like you'll start to see operations getting queued. And as we see, like as we have more and more high volume users coming through, like more and more EU institutions, more and more enterprises, like obviously if you're you're managing hundreds of installations or even tens of installations, honestly, you want to automate as much of this stuff as possible. So this is something that we're investing in heavily going forward because obviously it's something that's super high value for our customers. I would expect better visibility and tooling later in this year around things like rate limiting and queuing.
Alrighty, next question is, how difficult would it be to set up your own local load testing with like Jmeter or Apache benchmark rather than going through a third-party web tool?
So that would be pretty easy. What you would do is that's another example of where having your own orchestration system would come in handy. Like it's really easy to have Jenkins trigger that locally. It's really easy to have Jenkins trigger Apache Bench. Apache Bench is a pretty brute force method for doing load testing, but it certainly is better than nothing. Jmeter is a little bit more sophisticated. There are others you could do. You can devise all kinds of like locally operated load tests, and if you want to invest the time in configuring that, and like it's more work to get it set up to like give you the pretty graphs and everything. You might not need that. Right? You just want to get the raw XML output and keep track of that versus where you were before. So the way you would do that is you would have Quicksilver say, I've got a deploy going on here. Let me again trigger out to the Jenkins instance or whatever it is that you want to run out there where the load test is actually going to run. If you actually want to run it locally on your desktop, that will be a challenge because you'll need to make sure that your desktop is accessible to the internet and then on when the deploy happens. But assuming what you mean is like on some kind of server or virtual machine connected to the internet that's under your control, it's pretty easy to do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I like just like sort of conceptually about what Quicksilver is doing is you're trying to say, look, like let's provide a framework, let's let people integrate the services and the methodologies they have. You know, like we could have Data Scrouse like take a bottle of gin in a weekend and make some sort of performance testing thing with inside of Pantheon. And that might work for a lot of people, but it might have things that people want or don't want. And being able to provide a framework where you can hook up anything you want to it helps us to see and like sort of let everybody try different stuff. Because the internet's changing really quickly. Performance testing tools that were good a year ago, may still be good now, may not. There may be new tools, and just trying to like take advantage of everything that you want the developers want is very important.
And I think, frankly, that goes with our overarching strategy and philosophy of being a platform. Platforms are about integration, and so there's like the things that we do. Like there are certain things that we do, right? Like we provide the Git repository for a site. And that was a decision that we made when we first started. And honestly, at this point, if we were going to do it all over again, I would make that totally optional. Because the reality is that there are better, best-of-breed tools out there for doing code review and pull requests like GitHub or Bitbucket or even GitLab that provide a lot more value than just our repo does. Like it's great that we provide a repo because if you don't have one, you're not going to use Git. If you're not going to use Git, you're not going to use version control and like downward spiral from there. But the goal of our platform really is to provide, sort of a rock solid foundation, a number of bulletproof workflows, best practices kind of out of the box. But then beyond that, it's really letting people use the best of breed tools that are out there with these integration tactics, rather than trying to be a monolith where you have to do everything inside of Pantheon.
And a quick shout out too, if you get excited about a tool that maybe isn't part of our examples and it's something you're interested in working on or have done some code for, we have a Powers users list that is you can sign up on Google groups that you can sort of throw out some ideas or start a chat about this stuff. And if it gets to the point where you actually have some working code you want to like throw back at us, you could definitely just fork our Quicksilver example repository and open up a pull request. Like I've done some stuff on visual regression, and we had a gentleman who actually like took our stuff and hooked up their visual regression tool to Quicksilver as an example with a demo video and some docs. And we definitely want to encourage this stuff. If you're finding success around a specific tool, putting it in an issue, posting the power users list, or even making a pull request can get more people to help you with it and look at it, and works out, we'll roll it into the full repository because we want to give people a variety of options so they can pick the one that's best for them.
And the same thing is true with the Quicksilver plugins, where like if we want to extend and augment the command line tool with more of these like macro features or more like sort of like helpers and quick starts, that's something that it's real easy to get started and write an example command. If you have a thing that you feel like you type the same thing over and over again in your workflow, that's maybe a chance that you could make a plugin that will automate that piece of it for you. And chances are, if you're doing it over and over again, some other developer is too. So we could share that knowledge and like all kind of get better as a result of that.
Well, that also answers what's the process for contributing to the Quicksilver example.
Oh yeah, so the Quicksilver plugins, it's just you actually clone or get inspired by the example repo that's there, and then the current convention is announce your plugin on the power users list and we'll add it to the wiki. In the future, there'll be a more formal process for like getting into a directory, but that's all TBD, probably early this summer or so. But yeah, just go to the Terminus project, look at the wiki. There's a wiki page on plugins that should describe how to get started developing your own. And if you get something cool, like consider contributing it back.
All right, we're going to take two more questions. The next one is, what is the ETA for Terminus 1.0? Besides the typical when it's ready with a winky face.
Yeah, so we don't have a date, but I can say soon. With a horse face. Soon. It's not going to happen before DrupalCon. We have a bunch of other stuff that's in flight for that, and that we need to wrap up. But I think we have a pretty good punch list going of what needs to be there for 1.0, and everyone recognizes that it's time for us to do that, to commit to backwards compatibility for a number of things, to commit to some architectural decisions around plugins, around some of the way that core things work. So I would expect a Terminus 1.0, by sometime around the summer solstice.
And you'll know. We'll go to the Selden Vault, and we'll have a video of Josh Koenig explaining it, in the future. I recorded this 2 years ago, but this is the plan. It's coming out. So
that is not how it happens.
Psychohistory doesn't work if you know the predictions in the future from everybody. It's very important.
All right, we will take one more question. Again, this is a long one, so follow along. Could Matt and Josh address current best practices for the problem described here, which is Terminus issue 943? Continues along to say, I since learned that Drush CC all is better replaced by Terminus site clear cache. In general, the problem is I kick off a workflow. I want to monitor its progress programmatically and then start another workflow, a deploy, after the backup workflow is done. If the backup workflow fails, maybe I want to run some other code.
Yeah, so the answer here is, I think, as part of Terminus 1.0, or actually it could be a 1.1 thing since it's not really a backwards compatibility, but we should set the standard.
I would just say, looking, this is the issue.
Yeah.
One of the things that's probably blocking that feedback is that we don't give you the return the workflow ID in like a JSON format. So that you might have to go through, which is not ideal, the actual workflows list to actually, try to find it. But there's a pull request open to address this.
There's also a thing that we need to standardize the convention around, which is to make sure that we, in some cases, Terminus will proceed immediately when it is initiating a workflow, and in other cases, it will wait for the workflow to complete. So, for instance, when I was demoing at the very beginning, you saw that's one of the reasons why the clear cache is calling Terminus site clear cache is better, because it actually waits for the whole workflow to complete, which is like queuing on Pantheon, running it within Drush, and then making sure that the external stuff happened too. Versus if you call Drush CC all, it's just going to run the Drush command. It may, and our ability to catch failure around that is not as good, and so on and so forth. So the two things we need to get in place for that to be a really good experience are consistency about how a workflow ID, if any, was generated, is returned to the via Terminus, that you can pick up and make scriptable. So if you want to use the JSON output format probably, and then that would be a consistent thing. And then also making it consistent and probably have a consistent way to say wait or don't wait on a command that you're triggering a Terminus that does a workflow. Because I could see both cases where I just want to kick off 5 things and they're independent versus I have a script that goes through a set of stages and there's a serial dependency. So it doesn't make sense to start one before the other. And I think if you're doing the latter case, in addition to giving you the workflow ID and letting you poll for its status if you wanted to, we also should be consistently delivering exit codes. If I kick off a workflow through Terminus, I should get the workflow ID, and if I'm blocking on it, I should also, when it completes, if it succeeded, I'd get exit code 0, and if it didn't succeed, I'd get a non-zero exit code. So those are all the things that we would need to do to make these things fully scriptable from the command line side. And that's definitely the type of stuff we want to. That is in place in some cases, but not others, which is kind of an example of the consistency that we want to get in place for Terminus 1.0.
Right, looks like that's all we have time for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, please visit our website where you'll find a contact us page, and we'll put you in touch with the best member of our team. Thanks so much for spending your Thursday with us, and we hope you'll join us next month. Have a good week, everyone.
Ciao.